Hey everyone, government shutdown is official. Gaza is still literally and figuratively on fire. Gen Z continues to save the day. We like that. However, insurance premiums go brrr. Welcome back to Talk Show. As per the new American standard, nothing makes sense and the points don't matter. So last week we talked about the government shutdown, what that means. Feel free to review and check that out. I would love it if you checked out that previous video. But the real news is, yeah, it's official. It was tentative, highly likely when I made my last video, but it is now actually happening, and the shutdown is real. So how about a little, ultra brief recap on the sassy bananas that we're about to deal with. So as many as 750,000 workers could be furloughed, or even better, and I'm sure everyone loves this, working without pay. Ha ha ha. Everyone loves to work without pay, especially in the 1800s. What does that really mean? Essential services continue, but like non-essential ops, short for operations. That can be disrupted, could be paused entirely. So that means like support services, like phone centers and, digital billing or online payments, things like that. All that crap basically could be disrupted in a significant way, which I'm sure won't bother any of you. The thing that kind of gets me through all this, though, is that it's all this bipartisan baloney. So one side is blatantly lying, that's the Republicans, basically saying that there's millions of illegals on Medicaid, when quite literally the rules of the program that their own administration have on the website basically say illegals cannot have Medicaid. And at the same time, Democratic leadership kind of still being a bit of a stale fart. Chris Murphy did an AMA somewhat recently. It kind of fell flat. He's saying it's this moral moment, and I'm kind of like, hiya! Oh, tiny fly. He's saying there's this moral moment happening right now, and I'm like, okay, but like, we are having to take action in the moral moment? You're taking action in the moral moment? Like, who's taking the initiative of the moral moment is the question I have. Because it doesn't seem like it's him. I'm sure the speeches, etc., are trying to be inspiring, but, like, we need action. We need real action. Local organization, etc. So anyway, I think AOC is sort of my favorite Democrat at the moment, especially because she's really sort of hitting the pavement with Bernie Sanders. And say what you will about Bernie Sanders, the man basically tells it like it is. You know, you may think he's like an old fuddy-duddy from Vermont, but like the man got arrested for civil rights protesting, etc. back in, what was it, the 60s or some period of time in his early life. He's been around a long time, right? He's not a young man, which means he's seen a lot of crap. And I don't know about you, I believe in listening to the wisdom of our elders. So these things are all happening. I mean, the good news is, at least in my neck of the woods, we've got a new Raising Cane's chicken opening up to me. So that's great. Folks are like absolutely going crazy for RC or Raising Cane's. We'll see how they compete. They're going to have to throw down against the local favorite of Chick-fil-A in the fried chicken wars of 2025. So most of the like Chick-fil-A is near me, and the one that specifically is like up the street from my house has like double lanes to handle the demand of the chicken. Kind of fascinating to me. Like somehow, no matter what time of day I'm looking at ordering Chick-fil-A, it is always 10 minutes or less for delivery. Does not matter. Could be peak lunch hours, could be 1 o'clock in the morning. Actually, I don't know if they're open that late. But like in the hottest, busiest portions of the day, Chick-fil-A, that shit's on the way. Nah. How about we take a nice jaunt over to the economy spot? Let's talk a little bit about the market. Whee! Despite the government shutdown, despite it, Associated Press reports that U.S. stocks hit record highs. Kind of surprising, or not, because it does seem that the market is entirely disconnected from reality these days. Lots of the folks that I like to watch in terms of financial pundits are basically saying it's a incredibly risky time to be buying stock. Buffett and the gang are basically stockpiling more cash than they ever had. So fascinating. Take with that what you will. Speaking of Buffett-like folks, the equity funds in particular saw significant inflows. That's tied to hopes that the Fed will cut interest rates soon. I believe they already did, or that's forthcoming. I talked a little bit about that in my last episode. And yes, that's on the docket. The sort of side effect of the shutdown when it comes to market activity is that a lot of the economic data releases, if you're not aware, many businesses rely on the regular business updates, the economic data releases, as we're calling them, such as the September jobs report, which is at minimum delayed. The current administration probably doesn't want to share any jobs data because it looks incredibly good. It sucks. But because of that, all this shit is being delayed, and they're trying to use that to their advantage, to no one's surprise. Don't hold your breath. There's going to be a lot of fixing of numbers, and I think after this administration, assuming they ever leave, we will kind of look back on this moment in time as one of the least accurate economic periods in terms of like White House administration data. Oh boy. Zut alor. Let's head down to politics. I love talking about politics. No, I don't. I hate it. I wish I didn't have to talk about politics, but you're all my hostages. Thanks for being here. The Cheeto Supreme talked about using the government shutdown as a political opportunity, basically saying he's going to press for cuts to all the good Democratic shit that we all like. The things that protect us, like healthcare and, I don't know, rights. So if you didn't see it, they released this like insane fever dream AI sequence that basically like depicts Russ Vought as the Grim Reaper. Trump is like playing a tiny cowbell. He's not playing a cowbell, just so everybody knows. He's actually ringing like a town bell. So they've inaccurately portrayed what a cowbell actually looks like. Hopefully musicians across America were furious. But the rest of us should be looking at this like, what is going on? How can the administration, how can our president and official people be blasting AI slop like it's official in any capacity? So I hate that. But that just happened. Then let's tack on some other fun stuff. The Bad Orange Man basically made some controversial statements as well, talking about using the U.S. military in cities. U.S. cities. In particular, democratically run cities. Now, let's recall what the score is today. 1-0, Chicago to the Trump administration. They basically said, no, you're not going to put troops on the ground here. Portland has also said no. I don't know that they actually even were going to really mobilize troops to Portland, but the Portland mayor and I think governor of Oregon, if I remember where Portland is, I believe they said basically like, no, you're not going to use, we do not authorize this. You cannot send troops here. So that's 2-0 states up on Trump administration. That's lovely, right? We like that. So Portland basically said, no, just keep trying, you big gangster man. So the stuff is getting out of control. The AI and memes coming from the White House at this point are like totally unhinged. It had been bad, right? It had been bad, sort of surreal, but it's officially straight off the rails with this new AI nonsense that's coming out. To the point that basically like Vancy Pants and Nazi Barbie number 2, Caroline Leavitt, basically had to comment on this in some of their recent appearances, and they both made incredibly lame claims to fame, saying that the president just likes to have some fun. Gosh, you know, he likes to have some fun while he's making insane claims. You know, it'd really be fun, honestly, if the president of the United States of America could act like a functioning adult for like 2 seconds. Can we have 2 seconds of functioning adulthood? I watched a hilarious video of Brian Tyler Cohen and Mark Elias talking about like the wild things that are going on. And Mark Elias made this great point that he was like, what's it like being Trump? Are people just like putting like an iPad with like Miss Rachel on, and then like in between those moments they're dragging him out in front of people and like making him watch stuff? Quick plug for Preschool Prodigies, my friend Rob. He does music education for kids. Think Miss Rachel, but a dude teaching music for children. It's delightful. Shout out to him. Okay, let's keep cruising here and talk a little bit of politics. I don't like to spend too much on it. It just happens to be what's happening. But let's go a little ancillary. Let's take a relevant stride and talk about public opinion and free speech. So, recent poll from Marist, that's a university, they basically found that a strong majority of Americans believe that the U.S. has gone too far in restricting free speech. Thank God that someone is saying something and getting some data out here. So that's right, folks. It's not just you. It is not. The rest of us Americans, most of us Americans, finally believe that something is wrong here, that there is too much constraint on freedom of speech. And we're at a point basically where like the bad things the president says just get you in trouble. And political enemies become targets. And Kimmel and Colbert, a great example of this. But Kimmel is also a great example of us making our displeasure known, right? We really socked it to Disney. I think they had like 3 million subscriber loss or something like that as soon as Kimmel dropped. And then they had to scramble and bring him back, and now he's back. So, wow. I do appreciate that gives us at least like a little bit of hope. Like, there's not just an endless tragedy of sad fascism ahead of us, but it does feel a bit exhausting. And to see people like lose and like push back against Trump and then kind of reverse some of the nonsense, I mean, that feels good. A little bit cathartic, I might say. So that's some of what's going on. I mean, the free speech thing, I think you have to call out. Like, this is the least free speech time in America, I think, in American history since the 30s. And we might remember what was happening towards then. So I think that's a good segue. Let's talk. Hiya! Did I get it? I might have finally got it. There's a tiny fly zooming around my head, and I can't stop him. Let's talk about world news. Wow. You might be sick of this, but we have to go back to Gaza. Interestingly enough, there is a U.S.-backed peace proposal, and it has seen at least partial acceptance from Hamas. The partial acceptance has come in the form of terms of hostage exchange and some governmental changes. At this point, I really just want the genocide and still hate Trump. But if they can at least broker a deal that ends the suffering, that seems like a good thing. I imagine he'll manage some sort of grift, as Trump and the allies somehow always seem to try to get as much personal benefit as they can out of any world news or any world event that they can get their sticky fingers in. Now, somewhat related to Gaza, but adjacent, our friends in Israel, which I use that term loosely, intercepted a flotilla intended to deliver aid to Gaza. And that's bad news. Now, the world thankfully reacted to this and said, hey, not cool. But then sort of did nothing else. And that seems to be the trend here. Really not a big fan of that. How do we better step up to this plate? I have no idea. But at least being aware of it, you can vote like you know about these things. Cool. Interesting story from Europe. Drones are basically gumming up the works in many different places. Guardian essentially reported that the Munich airport was disrupted by multiple drone sightings, which basically caused like fully canceled flights. There was some discussion about like what's going to come out of this situation. There's calls of some kind to basically permit shooting down unauthorized drones when they're over critical infrastructure. And it's not just happening in Germany. I can only imagine how that would go if it was enacted in the United States. Well, Bob flew his drone over the critical infrastructure of my garage, so naturally, I just blasted him and the drone. Good old America. Youth protests, continue to rise. Not just in Nepal. We talked a little bit about that. I finally nailed my man Sal down, figuratively. Wow. For an interview, so we're going to talk to a Nepalese immigrant and get some real information about that next weekend. Super excited for that. It's finally happening. Oh boy. But recall from our last episode, Nepal's Gen Z uprising quite literally overthrew the government. They used the magical app of Discord to elect an interim president. Incredible things happening over there. I found it just like a magnificent story, something unexpected and very happy. That being said, we now have other Gen Z protests starting to grow. Madagascar is an example, Peru is another, and even Morocco, which I just love to say Morocco, especially being a musician. I'm fondly reminded of maracas. Now, many of these countries have also experienced extreme weather, natural disasters like earthquakes, fires, lots of fires going on. So all that stuff kind of compounds the struggles of people locally, and that also creates some angst and unrest, and that might influence some of the additional protests going on. But it's great to see the youths, the kids with the beards, they're back out there, and they are bopping. They're making progress. Thank you so much, because us millennials, oh my God, we are slaves to our jobs. And we're just so tired. Okay, climate, wildfires. I was just talking about wildfires. A new study shows that globally, wildfires are more frequent. Some of you are not surprised by this. Climate change, right? But quite literally, this new study finds that the fires are more frequent, more destructive, and deadlier. So they're causing more damage. They're killing more people. They're hurting more people. And it is strongly linked to climate change, which is weird because at the UN, Trump literally just said climate change is the biggest con job ever. The counterpoint to that is this study calls out that many of the most expensive and most deadly wildfires ever have happened in the past decade. In the past 10 years, the spiciest, zestiest wildfires have happened. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Oh, gosh. Speaking of fires, maybe controlled fires in this case, global energy stuff. Let's talk about this for a quick moment. Oil prices actually fell. I think they've been trending a little bit downward, but oil prices fell last week. In particular, this is unusual because I guess OPEC was expected to raise output. I don't know why that's unusual. That seems to line up to me in my mind. OPEC increases output, oil prices would go down. There's more in the market. I don't know. But I do like seeing gas prices go down. Huzzah. I like to drive my Camaro. It makes me feel very happy. For me, as I've reviewed more stuff about what's happening on the world stage, I think right now the biggest news is coming from Japan. So if you're not familiar, Japan essentially has just elected their next and first female prime minister. So her name is Sanae Takaichi. I'm pretty good with my Japanese pronunciation. I hope I got that close, but Takaichi is definitely her last name. As I'm reading information about Miss Takaichi, Takaichi-san, I believe would be the correct honorific. Basically, as I read about her, she states that Margaret Thatcher is her hero. Cool. All right. Thatcher did some cool stuff. Thatcher may also not be popular in some circles, but well-known name, let's say. But some of what I've been reading kind of skews in another direction, maybe not so Thatcherly. One of the things she said basically was we can shut down broadcasters for bias. So basically, in her role as MIC minister in 2016, she basically said stations that air politically biased programs can be suspended. Does that sound familiar? Doesn't sound like Thatcher, though. Sounds like someone else. In 2023, there was a broadcast law where basically she made a promise or statement and then she had to walk it back. The quick and dirty of this is that internal files surfaced about political pressure on TV. She called them fabricated, and then she said she would resign if they were authentic. Then the ministry basically acknowledged that the docs were theirs, and she was like, oh, no, I didn't say that. Resign. Come on. Why would I resign when I'm the law? She was also in a neo-Nazi photo. She says she doesn't know the guy. There was a magazine ad endorsing a book that praised Hitler's campaign tactics. Uh-oh. She appeared in that magazine ad and later said that she didn't recall. Now, there's a laundry list of these things about Ms. Takaichi, but suffice to say that she is a right-wing nationalist and another somewhat scary leader. And if you get a chance to take a look, look up a picture of her. She also kind of looks like God saw the mask from Screen and was like, I could totally make a person look like that. Let's keep cruising. Yeah. No. Media and pressure on journalism. So the AFP, one of world news's sort of major news agencies, this is sort of like the Associated French Press, something like that. I forget the actual acronym, but it is a French press agency. It's a global news agency, and they've essentially announced that they're under intense financial and political strain. So contracts are canceling, there's downsizing, threats to journalistic independence. But why is this story meaningful? The big number for me was that this agency recorded 25 serious incidents with AFP journalists in just the first half of 2025. More than the entire year of 2024. The agency director, my guy Phil Chetwynd, Chetwynd, what a great last name. Basically, he commented, this is one of the most difficult periods for our profession since World War II, basically in the last 50 years. That's crazy. I talked about, some of the risk to the press in one of our previous episodes, especially when we're talking about Israel-Gaza situation. Oftentimes, double strikes, double taps are happening where, civilians and infrastructure are being bombed. And then as the press and medical help and all these other support services show up, they then attack again, which basically wounds all the people that are trying to save the dying people. So it's terrible. That's the kind of example of what's happening to AFP. Basically, their journalists are, and not just theirs, but journalists at large are borderline under attack directly. It's not even borderline, it's just happening. So let's be real about this. It's a dangerous time to be a journalist. So thank you for your service if you're out there reporting. We need you there, and I'm so sorry that you're under this tremendous risk. Last but not least, Human Rights Watch released its 2025 World Report. I'm sure you're expecting that to be chock full of good news. It's not, detailing basically human rights abuses and systemic challenges across 100 countries. And yes, the US is on the list. It is not great. It is not. As we're talking about the media, one of the more digital, short attention span medias out there we love is social media. There's quite a bit of interesting stuff trending on social media these days. I've got one of the hot ones for you here. Okay, so one of the new trends basically going around social media is this lovely thing called I Know Ball. I appreciate this because basically it's being an expert or being really good at just about anything. And this video happened to catch my eye, so shout outs to @AcquiredStyle. Yeah. Wow. Let's play that again. I don't know if you can see the spectacular do that this woman comes up with. I wish it didn't stop right there. Anyways, feel free to look that one up if you find that entertaining. I thought that was really cool because I think the I Know Ball trend is just a great way to show off that you're like an expert at anything. So it could be a musician, it could be sport. I mean, it can be sports, but it is not limited to sports, and I'm a big fan. In a similar vein, if you shoot heroin, short form video basically continues to dominate. No one is surprised by this. If you go to YouTube, they jam shorts straight into your face. They borderline make you eat the shorts. On Instagram, it's the Reels, if I remember my lingo correctly, and then TikTok is just short form content. These are the highest consumed media types on social media platforms. So if you didn't think it was a big deal, I don't know where you've been sleeping. However, generative AI continues to show up everywhere, and there is an unprecedented amount of AI slop. You might want to just assume whatever you're watching is AI slop. There was a video that I saw recently where it was essentially a woman showing off a new dress, and everything was AI generated. The woman's voice, the woman's clothing, the room that she was in, it was all AI generated. And it was borderline I could not tell that it was AI. It was like scary good AI. And at the same time, it also makes me fear for the folks out there that can't think critically, because this is just going to make you believe nonsense. And, oh boy, who knows where this is all going to go? Yikes. Continuing the trend, social commerce has taken over. I am a digital marketer. I live in the digital marketing space. That's kind of what my day job is. But more and more, people basically turn to social media to get their product recommendations as opposed to going out on Google, using something like an AI service like ChatGPT to make recommendations for you. I find that interesting, especially because I'm an SEO guy. That's a bit of an erosion of like traditional search engines. It's interesting to see right now search dominance, has sort of lasted, and there's been some minor disruptions, but I don't think it's going to be like fully dethroned anytime soon. Recent statistic came out that shows somewhere in the neighborhood of like 90-something% of ChatGPT users are also still Google users and jump back and forth. Unexpectedly, this was a trend that I didn't think would bubble up to the surface, especially during the wild, alt-right, insane, nationalistic times of today. But there's actually a rising focus in cultural fluency alongside story-based content as opposed to like generic brand messages. So that's interesting. A lot of times, if you're on, social media, if you're on digital platforms, etc., many of the historical branded messages, campaigns, advertising for a company have been like generic and about the brand. But these days, things are getting like a little more story-like. Sometimes you get some weird ones, quirky stories, fun stories. But basically, the nice thing about this is that the rise of cultural fluency at least sounds really optimistic to me. The idea here being that hopefully Americans are getting in on the cultural fluency. Because historically speaking, we're just so good at that. Last but not least, in the fabulous world of social medias, it's October. Fall season, pumpkin spice, everything. Yum, yum, yum. I am an Oktoberfest guy. Even though Oktoberfest, for those of you who don't know, is actually celebrated in September, if you're in Europe, we tend to just smash it all across the month of October as well over here in the States. And the beers are delightful. If you haven't had a good Oktoberfest, highly recommend it. Usually it's like an amber type of ale. They're oftentimes very crisp. They've got these nice sort of fall, sort of tawny flavors. Really good, maybe a little caramelly zip in some of them. You can also find Marzen-style beers, which is, I believe, a type of fest beer, but it's basically harvested and brewed for the Oktoberfest season. And then last but not least, there's fest beer, and fest beer is one of my favorites. Fest beer is super light, super drinkable, but very, very flavorful. Really sort of like bready, malty, that nice kind of buttered toast flavor when you exhale after you take a big sip. Yeah. Wow, wow, Wowzer's Castle. Always an interesting time to be here in the modern reality. So let's move on to our main story today. We're going to get a little more solemn. Today's main story, we're going to talk about health insurance premiums. This is, again, near and dear to my heart. I work with essentially an HR company, a business that offers benefits and also provides payroll, some other stuff like that. So, as you might expect, changing health insurance premiums are hugely disruptive, not just for businesses, but really for everyday Americans, right? We need health insurance. Bernie Sanders keeps saying that we deal with the highest prices, we have the worst system, so on and so forth. That's all true. Check him out. You may have heard of him, Bernie Sanders from Vermont. Soon, the news really is that the enhanced premium credits, so these are tax credits that cover the premiums under the Affordable Care Act, basically they're going to expire. And right now, it does not look like Congress is going to act on this. Congress is going to act on this due to partisan shenanigans, as no one is surprised. Once again, Republicans are lying and saying illegals. Democrats are just like, no, you even have on your website, that's not the case. People need health insurance. But it's mixed messaging. Not everybody's doing a great job on the Democrat side. And the right basically are just straight up lying to you about what's actually happening. So, since 2021, the enhanced credits reduce the net cost of health insurance, basically for people who buy their plans on the ACA marketplace. So if you don't have an employer-sponsored plan, I think there's a huge number of us out there that just expect everyone to be on an employer-sponsored plan if you're employed or not. That is not the case. But basically, these sort of ACA marketplace plans are like the free market of insurance plans. Basically, if you don't have an employer-sponsored one, you got to buy one yourself. Without the ACA subsidies in place, the premiums that the companies charge, which are called gross premiums, because they're gross, remains the same. So these premiums that the insurance company is going to charge do not change, but individuals receive far less financial assistance, and that means that like your out-of-pocket costs could just explode unexpectedly. Not great, bad, terrible bad, awful. Who's impacted, right? Who is this really going to hurt? 24 million Americans right now use the ACA marketplace. That is a lot. That is not quite 10%, but it's more than 5%, and it's a lot of people. When you really think about 24 million people. Most of these folks are relatively low or middle incomes. So their incomes are probably incredibly frustratingly too high to qualify for Medicaid, which would give them more coverage, but too low to be able to just like absorb an insane like price hike. Not great. If the subsidies fully lapse, basically analyses suggest that 4 million or more Americans may just entirely drop health coverage because they just can't afford it. Like I said, a lot of folks that use these programs are in this unfortunate middle ground. They just make a little too much money to be in Medicaid, but they don't make enough money that they have all this wiggle room to absorb crazy health insurance premiums. As you dig into this information further, some states are getting walloped way harder than other states. Like, oh my God, like zesty price increases that I just never expected. Alaska. Many people don't think about Alaska being way out yonder. Hawaii's way out yonder as well. Alaska is one of the ones where you could see as much as a 346% increase in your insurance premiums. More than triple. Insane. California. You'd think, everyone's got money in California, right? Silicon Valley. Californians might have to pay 122%. Florida, not necessarily a place I think of when I think of wealthy people, unless we're in St. Petersburg, Clearwater. Florida might see 132% increase in premiums. Another state that I think probably doesn't have the money to afford this is Mississippi. And that sucks. They could see a 314% increase. Texas could see a 289% increase. So these numbers are insane. In certain areas, it could be triple or more. And again, like, no shade thrown at Mississippi, but like, I don't think any state could handle 300% increases, let alone Mississippi. I just am under the impression that there aren't tons of millionaires in Mississippi. Apologies, Mississippi, if that's where all the millionaires are. So to make matters worse, insurers basically have already submitted price increases. So premium increases are just expected for 2026. That's all happening before any of the subsidy changes are calculated. So it is already going up. It would go way, way up if these subsidies go. Many Americans are not pleased, and you may not be pleased. I'm not pleased, but we have some official data that shows Americans are not thrilled by this. So a recent KFF, which is Kaiser Family Fund, recent study from them basically found that 78% of Americans are in favor of extending ACA credits. That's kind of a big deal. Some Republicans are even starting to cave, right? Especially in states where there's a lot of ACA-dependent individuals. Now, coming up, open enrollment starts soon for the ACA marketplace. That's on November 1st. Many employer-sponsored plans also tend to start their benefits enrollments period coming up pretty soon. Usually November is like that magic month. Some folks as early as October. So anyway, that means that these things are going to be starting to happen real soon. So it's not like nebulous in the future, big money increase. It's like, no, maybe next month you suddenly may have an incredible price hike on your insurance premiums. Let's talk about some possible scenarios here. As I said, it's not 100% set in stone, but there is a slim chance that Congress might extend the deadlines, and that would mean premiums remain affordable. Woo! Dramatic increases are avoided. We're not optimistic about that one. A partial extension. This could be a thing. Maybe there's a shorter, like 1 to 2 year extension, and that provides wiggle room for broader reform to be negotiated. So in this case, you might see states actually step in and help with local subsidies, which would sort of soften that gut punch a little bit. This is speculation, I remind you. And then last, the full-on lapse, which is where enrollees see huge cost increases. Some people just drop coverage entirely because they can't afford it. And then the ACA marketplace becomes riskier. So the risk pool of the ACA marketplace becomes less healthy. They become sicker. Healthier people leave the program. And what that means is it compounds the increasing insurance premiums because the pool is riskier. You got to charge more money to cover people. It's a lot to digest. Hopefully you don't have something like diverticulitis and are on an ACA plan because that digestion is now super risky. Goodness gracious, goodness gracious. Final reminder, folks. Vote like your life depends on it. The answer to health insurance premiums being on the rise can't just be, well, guess I'll just die. At least I hope not. And on that murky, delightful, a little bit sad note, I say thank you for watching.